Today is World Social Work Day, a celebratory day that aims to highlight the achievements of social work, to raise the visibility of social services for the future of societies, and to defend social justice and human rights. In honor of this auspicious day, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ashley Cureton, for her exemplary achievements and commitment to addressing inequality and human rights violations locally and globally. Dr. Ashley Cureton, or Dr. C, as her students affectionately call her, is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work and Marsal Family School of Education at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She is also a visiting scholar at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. Prior to her current role, she was a provost postdoctoral fellow and lecturer in the School of Education and the Department of Sociology at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Cureton identifies as a forced migration and international social work scholar who seeks to identify culturally specific interventions, programs, and policies to improve the educational, socio-emotional, and environmental outcomes of refugee children, youth, and their families in the US and abroad. By engaging in community-based participatory research, she is further interested in the role of institutions, such as resettlement agencies, refugee-led organizations, and schools, in supporting the distinct needs of these vulnerable yet resilient groups. She has over a decade of research and practice experience collaborating with refugee and migrant populations in global contexts like Uganda, South Africa, Zambia, Ghana, Morocco, Lebanon, Jordan, Ecuador, Peru, India, the Bahamas, and the United States. Ooh. Prior to attending graduate school, Dr. Cureton worked as a research associate at Northwestern University's Institute for Policy Research. She also served as a research fellow for the United States Department of State in Turkey, working with Syrian refugee youth in school and community settings. Dr. Cureton received a PhD and master's degree from the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice at the University of Chicago. She also received graduate certificates in forced migration and refugee mental health from Harvard University, the University of Oxford, and Northwestern University. But there's more. Dr. Cureton has published over a dozen articles in top peer-reviewed academic journals such as Youth and Society, Urban Education, International Social Work, Children in Schools, Journal of Adolescent Research, and Journal of Career Assessment, to name a few. She has received funding support from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, National Endowment of the Arts, Michigan Humanities Council, Fosbeck Fund for Research and Experimentation, and the National Center for Institutional Diversity. Dr. Cureton has received several prestigious awards, such as being recognized by Diverse Issues of Higher Education as a 2025 Emerging Scholar due to her exceptional research, teaching, and service in the fields of social work and education, as well as the Elizabeth Butler Alumni Award from the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice, which celebrates a recent graduate who has shown remarkable potential and extraordinary career success in the field of social work. Dr. Cureton has also been recognized as an exceptional educator, winning the 2022 Teacher of the Year Award within her first year as a professor. On a personal note, I just want to say that I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Cureton for the past 2.5 years that I've been on staff here at the School of Social Work, and she is an exemplary person, just human being, as well as being researcher, professor, friend, support, mentor. I think the amount of guidance she's given me in my personal and professional journey, as well as the countless number of hours she provides to our students, as well as her peers in their journey in social work, is truly remarkable. So with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Cureton to present on the following exciting topic: Lost Not Found, Lessons Learned from a Black Woman Solo Traveler. Let's give her a round of applause.
Hello there. That was a little dim. Give me a little more. Hello there. In the virtual world, hello out there. Can I get some comments in the chat box to signal that you are here? Greetings and salutations. It is such a delight to be here today. Folks, today is a celebration. It's a celebration because it's World Social Work Day. And so, for those of you who may be wondering, what is World Social Work Day? That exists. It is a thing. We didn't make it up. It is a time to celebrate social workers, like many of you in the room, who are committed to addressing social inequality locally and globally. And so I am thrilled to be here today to talk about some of the global work that I've done. And so, welcome. Now, oh, let me just do this. Huh? Huh? Yeah. Come on through. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, yay. All right. So, in terms of this holiday or this occasion, the theme of World Social Work Day is strengthening intergenerational solidarity for enduring well-being. And so, as someone who loves to travel, and I didn't start off loving to travel, we will talk about my journey and how I got here today. I am excited to think through how, as a collective, we can create change across the globe and across generations. And so, for the social workers who are online, for the folks who are here, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your commitment to social change. Thank you for your commitment to being game changers all across the world. And so, I traveled to 103 countries as of December 3rd, 2024. Now, as you can see, some of this is represented. Some of the countries you may not know, that's okay. But it really has been transformative for the work that I've done. Now, once again, I didn't start off saying I'm going to travel the world. And in fact, I didn't know I was close to 100. Now, there is a club called the Travelers Centuries Club that allows you to have entryway or to have support from others who love traveling just as much as you do. Now, about 3 years ago, one of my sisters said, "Where are you in your count?" I said, "I don't know, just travel. I have no like running list or things that I'm going to do. I just want to see the world." And so I think I was about 86. And she said, "Well, why don't you just get to 100? It sounded like a nice round number. So I said, okay. Like that was easy, right? Just get to 86, get to 100 countries after 86. But one thing that I've tried to do, and we're going to talk about travel tips a bit later, is when I travel, I'm very intentional about seeing a little bit more of the world. But once again, this ballooned into something that even I was pretty shocked to make. And then I didn't realize I was on track to reach all 7 continents. Now, yeah, Australia, Europe, Asia, that all sounds good. But people were perplexed as to why I wanted to go to Antarctica. It's cold in Antarctica. Why would you do that? At this point, I was living in Chicago. You live in Chicago. It's cold there. Why do you need to see penguins and seals? Frankly, I didn't have to see them, but it was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. In fact, if you see photos, it looks like I photoshopped myself because you have penguins that are wobbling next to you. I did not pet them. People ask me that. Did you pet the penguins? I did not. They're wild animals. I don't pet wild animals. But it's so pristine and it's beautiful. And so you have seals and whales. Mind you, the ship I was on is for nerdy nerd people like me because we were looking at whales that have not been accounted for yet. So we were helping scientists identify whales or different species. And so once again, didn't set out for this achievement or this goal, but it happened. And so what has happened is allowed me to reflect a lot more on my journey and what comes next. And so the Traveler Centuries Club, it was created back in 1954 in California. This is an earlier picture. There's not a lot of people who look like me. Sadly, there still aren't a lot of people who look like me. And so when I found out about the club, I'm like, oh, what is this? I want to learn more. The really cool thing about this organization is it allows you to connect with other travelers who are just as passionate about travel, who think about it, dream about it, figure out, they seek out ways to learn more and to travel. And so it's been very, I've only been to a few meetings. They meet maybe once or twice a month, but the goal is to expose people to different lands, different areas that you might not be familiar with. And so I am in the process of writing a travel book or memoir so that I can capture some of the lessons that I've learned. So you're getting an introduction. You're getting a little preview of what's going to be in the book. Buy the book. Buy the book. Buy the book. And so how I've structured this will account for different stories, different narratives, different experiences that have led me to this exciting achievement. So, because I'm an educator and you perhaps want to know where I'm going with this, first we're going to talk about from Louisville, Kentucky, that's where I'm from, to being a globetrotter, the never-ending story. There's a book called The Never-Ending Story. Raise your hand if you've heard about this book. It's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to give you a little synopsis. Don't worry. The second one is people always ask, you're not a refugee, Ashley. So how did you start working with refugees? I'm going to tell you some of the earlier experiences that prompted that, as well as my commitment to engage in international education. Third, what are you? So this is a question I receive often when I travel because people don't really know what I am. Now it sounds offensive, doesn't it? I'm a human. Yeah, sure. But I'm also a Black woman. I'm also a light-skinned Black woman, right? So we're going to talk about what some of this means in terms of race, the anti-Blackness that exists, which we won't spend a lot of time on that, but I want to do a part 2. We can do it. And also colorism and how this is a pervasive issue all around the world. And some examples of that. 5, because some folks may be here just to get some tips. They're like, Ashley, you've traveled. Let me know. How can I do that? I'll give you some travel tips, some best practices. I won't charge you. There's no fee. And then after that, you're going to reflect on some of your travel goals. So there, for folks who are present in person, there's a postcard that's by your seat, hopefully. We're going to do an exercise where you reflect on your travel goals. Folks, you do not have to travel the entire world. That is not the expectation. Traveling to the next city over, or to somewhere in the US, which the US, by the way, has so much to offer. There's so much beauty here. Or to another place in this world, you're gonna share what that looks like and where that would be. Also, for folks in the room, there are books. I have an obsession with books. I better, because I'm a professor, so I have to read a lot. So I will be raffling off books related to travel. I do this in my classes as well. Raise your hand if you've taken the class with me. So you all know, there's some folks in the beginning, hey, shout out, yes, shout out to the students, yes. Raise your hand if you're a student in general. Yeah, oh, represent in the virtual world. Raise your hand. I love students. I have the best job ever. I really do. And I'm not getting paid to say that. I don't get a bonus or anything. I love to raffle off books based on the theme that's covered. And so I want to continue to embrace and support learning. One book that's particularly cool is a book by, she's from Uganda, but lives in Detroit, who has traveled to every country in the world. Her name is Jessica. She is awesome. We should invite her to speak. I like that. I would love that. I'm going to raffle off this book. And so I also have other treats from Indonesia and India that I'm going to raffle off as well. And so, yeah, more treats to come. All right. And then for my Zoom folks, because I am all about inclusivity, I want to make sure you feel taken care of. If you're not speaking, make sure you mute yourself so we don't hear that conversation with your partner or you're talking to your dog. Feel free to access the raise hand function if you have a question. There will be a Q&A at the end, and so let us know if you have something to share. Keep your cameras on if you want, but you don't have to because you're not the focus now, but when we meet in groups, if you could turn your cameras on, that would be great. All of you will have access to these slides, and so my gift to you. And then finally, for folks online, you can post your comments or questions in the chat box. Please avoid side conversations just so we can remain focused on this talk. All right, that's me, in case you didn't know. Little Ashley, AKA Foodie. I was a little chunky baby, and so they called me Foodie. It wasn't that clever, but you know, it was good. Those are my sisters as well, Sanae and Bethany. I was a jolly kid. I had a vast imagination. I used to talk to all kind of objects. My family, they were a little concerned at first, but so far, so good. And so I was excited to attend school. I loved school. And even though I came from a modest background where we didn't have a ton, my family, they always instilled the value and the importance of education. And so I was the kid who was really sad when school ended. And so my mom, she said, you know what, let's take her to the library and she can review and read books. And so that's what I did. I also played Number Munchers on like one of the first Apple computers. Yeah. Shout out to like 80s babies who played Number Munchers. Yeah, we didn't have the fancy laptops, folks. It was the Number Munchers. They were big. And so I became really good at multiplication and division. And I read and read and read. And I read so much that I approached the librarian and I told her I have 2 goals in life. I'm going to read every book in the library, and I'm going to become a librarian and take your job. I was a little sassy thing, can you tell? And so she said, good luck. She said, read every book. I said, okay. And so one of the books that I loved to read was The Never Ending Story. Now, if you're thinking, Ashley, come on, get to what's the point? Okay, well, The Never Ending Story features travel through the magical world, Fantastica. And it's through a book with the protagonist, Bastian, experiencing adventures and facing challenges as he learns about the importance of stories and his own identity. Folks, I was hooked. I'm like, where are we going? The book is actually fairly big. I think I was maybe like 7 or 8 when I read it, and then I read it again. And so I wanted to know more. So for those of you who are still like, what? So Bastian's journey begins. He's a shy and lonely boy, but he finds a magical book in a library that transports him to the world of Fantastica. He discovers that this land is in danger from the nothing, a force that threatens to consume the land and its inhabitants. And through this, Bastian meets the childlike empress, the ruler of Fantastica, who is in a weakened state and needs someone to rule to help restore her power. And then from this, there's wishes and there's consequences, and this causes positive and negative changes of this land. And then there's a whole new creation. So if you're like, whoa, Ashley, my head is spinning, what are you talking about? Okay, when I was 10, I was vibing with this. I was like, I want to know more. But folks, I think this sparked my interest to travel. I didn't know where. Once again, I grew up in a modest family, identify as first generation. And so it's not like we were taking lavish trips to Greece or to Italy. We were maybe taking trips to a neighboring city to go to an amusement park or to see family, but we weren't traveling to other places. And so my brain couldn't fathom what that would look like. But if Bastian can go somewhere, then I can too. And so that's kind of what planted the seeds. Fast forward. My mom was obsessed with Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones. Now, if we cast a modern light or a modern, kind of gaze, there's a lot of issues with Indiana Jones. I just want to throw that out there. We could probably do a deep dive on some of the racist, xenophobic statements that are made. But at the time when I was a child, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I thought that was a really cool job. Now, it sounds somewhat grandiose because in my mind, I thought I was going to be traveling like Indiana Jones all around the world, and I would identify these incredible artifacts, and that's not what happened. I did go to San Salvador, Bahamas, and I did an archaeological dig when I was in college. And so this is 19-year-old Ashley back in the day. Woohoo! And what I learned, archaeology is an incredible field. I just didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, this is bad. It's methodical. It's not as glamorous as Indiana Jones. They lied to me. And so when my mentor asked me, she's like, so you're going to major, you're going to like specialize in archaeology? I said, never, ever again, ever, ever. Can't pay me money. I said, but can I travel some more? Is there another trip I can take? She said, okay. So I do believe that this experience opened up my interest and desire to travel and learn more about other cultures. It just made me realize I didn't want to be an archaeologist. And folks, especially for students in the room, that's okay, right? So sometimes we engage in activities and we think it has to yield something, it has to further our work in some way. Sometimes it allows you or gives you some insight as to what you don't want to do. So instead of me wasting years and applying to graduate school and spending a lot of money and time in those spaces, I was able to learn, I don't want to do this in the future, but a very cool experience nevertheless. And so I graduated from college. I told my mom, and shout out to my mom and dad if I think they're on the call, so love you, you're great. I graduated from college. I said, I'm moving to South Africa. They were like, well, what are you going to do? I don't know. But what are you going to do though? Like, where are you going to live? Don't know. Figure it out when I get there. That sounds like a young 21, 22-year-old, right? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something. So I moved to South Africa, and I worked in the township, in the Langa township, as a instructor. And so at the time, I didn't know who a refugee was. It wasn't on my radar. I had no exposure to this topic prior to working in this space. But I said, okay, something's going on here. We have people who are fleeing from East Africa and from Central Africa, and they're fleeing because of turmoil that happens. And I don't quite know why there's so many obstacles that they're having to face. Not to mention that South Africa has its own history of apartheid, of various groups being denied their rights. And so it was a very complex yet educational space for me to have this epiphany, right? I said, okay, I want to learn more about this. Afterwards, I ended up going to Morocco. And I was supposed to stay in Morocco for 6 months. I stayed for 2 weeks. You may be wondering, why did you leave so early? Well, I was encountering young children who were displaced, who had lost body parts, who had lost their family members. And frankly, I was ill-equipped to support them. Another lesson, and I share this in my classes all the time, sometimes we can have the best intentions and we want to help people, or some of us want to save people. We're not saving folks. And we actually do more harm than good. So I said, you know what? It's time for me to go back to school. It's time. I need to learn more about this issue and get more insight and more training. And so afterwards, I went to University of Chicago, where I went for my master's and PhD, worked a little bit in the middle, so that I could learn more about refugees. And so I volunteered and I worked within Chicago and refugee resettlement agencies and refugee-led orgs so that I could understand the landscape a bit more. Also, I knew I had an interest in children. There's a common thread in all the work that I do that I'm constantly working with children and youth. And so I said, okay, maybe I can be a school social worker. So anybody in here wants to be a school social worker, I understand. Yes. You raise your hand with pride. Yes. That was me. Anybody in the online world, if that's you, you are seen, my friends. And so I tried to kind of merge and kind of create this field of study. So I'm going to grad school. Remember, I've been bitten by the travel bug. So I went to Peru and I did some work for a summer. Shout out to the global social work students who are traveling this summer. Raise your hand if you're doing a little travel. Woo woo. Get that learn on. That was me. So I went to Peru, then I went to Ecuador. And I said, what's next? Students, do you ever wonder that sometimes? Like, what's next? All right, like, yes, every day, every moment. I write it in my journal. No, I get it. One thing I always tell students, and this is true, life is kind of serendipitous or, divine intervention, whatever you ascribe to, right? I didn't have a plan at 22 what would happen, right? So I'm winding down. I too have the question, what next? And so I had a conversation with one of my mentors, Dr. Waldo Johnson Jr. Raise your hand if you know Waldo. Oh, yeah. Amazing scholar from University of Chicago. I went to him for an advising session. It was just a very innocent kind of checkpoint. I was graduating soon. He said, Ashley, how's it going? I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So that's one thing. I said, two, I was slated to go to Paris with a girlfriend. We had planned a trip. Folks, remember I told you first gen, I was low income. I was working a full-time job while I was in grad school. So I understand for folks who are like, it's hard out here in these streets. I understand. And so I saved my money. At the last minute, she backed out. I know, Trina, thank you. I was very upset. Borderline, should I end this friendship? No, I'm just kidding. We're still friends. She's amazing. I love her. But I was upset at that point because I didn't get to go to Paris. I was like, I can't go. So I just happened to overlap with Waldo, who, I told this story, and he said, well, why don't you just go by yourself? What? No, I'm not going by myself. That's like, it looks like I don't have friends. Right? Like these were some of the, I'm rattling off reasons. And he said, but go by yourself. He was like, you planned it, go by yourself. I said, I can't do that. I just can't. I'm like, I'm a woman. Women don't travel by themselves. I can't leave this country. I'm poor. Like I'm low income once again. I'm like, I don't have the money to really afford. He's like, you don't have to stay in 5-star hotels, but just go. And then he said, if you want to see the world, you must be prepared to do it on your own. I was like, what? Now, folks, I would like to say that altered my life completely at that moment, but it didn't. I did not go to Paris. I know. You were hoping I would say, I booked that flight and I was gone. I was like, okay, whatever, Waldo. Actually, Dr. Johnson, I was very respectful. I was like, Dr. Johnson, I don't know. It's not my jam. But it stuck with me because I tried to plan another trip and I can't remember where I was trying to go to at this point. Let's just make up a country. Name a random country. I don't know. Huh? Wait, what did you say? Jordan. I did work in Jordan. Let's say Jordan. So, right, there was another trip and I eventually said I have to go by myself because I remember Tokyo. So I was going to go to Japan. Same thing. I asked a friend, I was like, let's go to Tokyo. We planned everything. They backed out. That time I went. I said, I'm going. And it yielded a lot of different experiences. I was terrified. We'll talk about that a bit later. But it was the introduction to my solo travel, which, as you can see, and what we've talked about today, morphed into something pretty big. So the next chapter will be domestic and global refugee work. So as I stated before, many students reach out to me all the time and they say, Ashley, why are you, refugees? What's going on there? So I'm gonna map out a few experiences that really motivated me to engage in this work. And I still do this work. And so if you are interested in refugee and migrant populations, come find me because you're my people. Everybody here is, we're all fam here, but you're really, really like my folk, right? Because if you're watching the news, if you're paying attention to the political landscape here in the US as well as abroad, we need you, right? There is an attack on refugee and migrant populations. And so after graduating from U Chicago, I applied for an internship through the US Department of State to work in Turkey. Now, folks, I would like to tell you that when I traveled or worked in different countries, there was some intentionality around it. There was not. They paid for my trip. Bottom line, someone's gonna pay for your trip, you go, right? So I said, I'll go to Turkey. Folks, I was not disappointed. It was incredible. So I worked in Izmir and in Istanbul with Syrian refugees. And what I saw was jarring. And at this point, there have been millions of people who've been displaced. But even at that time in 2010, there were droves of people, especially children and youth, who were living in Izmir without their parents and they were trying to access educational supports. They were trying to navigate their lives in some way. And so, once again, folks, I'm still new to this topic. I'm new to the culture, the language. I'm also new to that. And so I really was trying to figure out what do I do? And I know many students, you all have this question as well, especially folks who want to do global work. What is your role? The other concern I had, and I teach this in my classes, is I don't want to perpetuate the same systems of oppression. I don't want to necessarily lean into or engage in some of the privileges that I have. And I don't want to create more harm. And so my concern and focus was, how do I minimize the harm that I can create just by being in the space and not understanding the cultural, socio-political, and historical context that I'm navigating? Came back to Chicago, and I started working at Northwestern as a research associate. And my goal was to learn more about research because I knew I wanted a PhD. Shout out to people who want to get their PhD. Not for the heart. It's not for the faint at heart. And so I worked in schools, and then once again, I'm working with Black, Brown, and Latinx youth to understand what are some of the challenges they're experiencing. And so that in and of itself gave me a broader context as in terms of struggles that they were having in the US and how I could possibly be a support system to them. Now, fast forward. Now, at this point, folks, remember, when I work somewhere, I usually tack on other places. That is a strategy, by the way. So let's say you're working or you're doing a conference in one context, and then I say, I have a few more days. I have a few more weeks. I have a few more months. I'm going to travel to this other place. And so when I lived in India, which I'll talk about in the future, I lived in India off and on for 2 years. I ended up traveling all over South Asia. I was barely in India sometimes. They were like, so where are you going this time, Ashley? I was like, well, I'm going to go to Sri Lanka, which is southern part of India. I'm going to Nepal. I'm going to Oman. I'm going, right? So I typically try to maximize on that because you can get cheaper flights. It's easier to navigate. You don't have to spend weeks and weeks in some countries. They're actually very small. Some countries are as small as like a US state, like a state like Michigan. And so that was my way of kind of seeing more of the world. But I'm adding that because you may be wondering, well, how does she get to 100? Like that's still it's a gap. Well, once you do, you're based in one place, you can travel all over. And so that's exactly what happened when I was an intern at the UNHCR, so the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland, which Switzerland is very expensive. I didn't have any money. I only ate one meal a day while I was there. My mentor eventually found out and she invited me over to her house. I was so happy. I understand what it's like to live on a little bit. And Geneva's so expensive. But the reason why I didn't have a lot of money is because I was determined to go to Germany, to France, travel all around Switzerland. And that's exactly what I did. Now, what was unique about this experience is it gave me a chance to learn more about the refugee crisis on a global scale. Now, what some of you may not know, and this shouldn't surprise you, is that the US is one of the top funders of the UNHCR. And so anytime an issue would come up, people would dance around who could fund it. They were like, it would be nice if someone could give us money. If anyone could give us money, that would be great. And so I sat there, doctoral student. I'm like, I don't, who is this? Who? It was the US. And so it gave me a greater sense of awareness around some of the challenges of implementing initiatives and programs that could help refugees. At one point, I told my students this: I wanted to be a lawyer. I still want to be a lawyer. Don't be surprised if you see a JD behind my name at some point, right? Not anytime soon. I need to get tenure. Don't worry, Trina. Don't worry. Tenure's on the way. Miles, you understand. But at a certain point, I said, I want to become a lawyer. And so I wasn't quite ready to make the jump, but I said, well, how about I attend programs? And so the certificates, which I racked up a lot. It probably makes up a JD at this point. But the two that stood out was the University of Oxford and Northwestern had programs on refugee law and forced migration. And so, although I didn't go to law school, it gave me a flavor and a broader sense of some of the legal frameworks that dictate the lives of refugees. And so, another little lesson for our students for sure, you don't have to keep going back to school, folks. School's expensive. Raise your hand if you, don't raise your hand, don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. But the school was expensive for me, so I can raise my hand for sure. Still paying out student loans, it's a thing. And so a way to kind of get around that is you can do like a graduate certificate to get something a little bit more specialized. It still looks good on your CV or your resume. It still gives you some more insight and guidance, and you learn more about some of the cutting edge, research. But you don't have to take out $50,000 to do it. So that was another thing I did. Since I wasn't quite ready to commit to law school, which would have been expensive and more time, I was excited about learning more around some of the legal frameworks. The other thing is, it's hard to engage in refugee work and you don't understand the law because it impacts their lives in so many ways. And so even now, I work with refugee populations here in the States. And so if I don't have a pulse on what's going on legally or some of the policies that are rolling out, I won't understand the scope and breadth of some of the challenges they're facing. And so this happens now. I work with a lot of refugees and migrants from Afghanistan, from Syria. And so if I don't understand the landscape, it's going to be difficult for me to think about programs and supports that would be advantageous for them. So another reason why I was motivated to do this work or to explore these routes. And so I can't assume, because it's in my blood, I can't assume that you all know who a refugee is. I will not go down a rabbit hole. You will not get a lecture on refugee. Maybe. I promise I won't. I kind of want to, though. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their country due to war or persecution. This is typically war or persecution that happens at the hands of the government. And it occurs because they are a part of a certain race, a religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular group. So there are hundreds of millions of people who are forcibly displaced. In terms of people who have been designated as a refugee by the UNHCR, that number is a bit smaller. But please understand the scope is massive. The numbers will continue to increase because of climate change, because of war and political unrest that ensues all over the world. And so, just as an aside, if folks are wondering, why do you focus on children? Well, because 51% of refugees are children. And so there is a dire need for us to really think through what that looks like for this population. And so the other thing to note is I also had a growing interest in international education. And so I do that here. I like it. It makes me happy. So when I was a doctoral student at University of Chicago, I led two groups. I led two master level group of students to Mumbai at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. If we had more time, I would definitely unpack some of the commonalities between caste and racism, because there's a whole lot. And this is something that is featured in a future class that I helped to create here at the School of Social Work. But one thing that it taught me was, not only do I want to focus on refugees and understanding their plight, and once again, doing research on that, but I like traveling. I really like global education, and I want other people to like it too. It sounds so simple, right? And so this was my entryway to thinking through, how can I support other students, other people like me, who would like to see the world, and to think about the exchanges. So I'm really big on that. This is not us entering global spaces and us offering some privileged or heightened kind of insight because we're from the West, but it really is an exchange. And so every time I travel, and India was no different, it gave me a chance to really learn about some of the best practices and interventions and supports that are being implemented in India. And so even in my classes, we spend a lot of time thinking about global interventions and supports that can be brought back here so that it truly is an exchange. But this was my introduction to international education, and folks, it has not stopped. And so two of the projects that I'm working on, I'm going to focus on the global one. There's one that I'm working on here to understand refugee resettlement experiences, which will yield a comic book. By the way, I have a background in the arts, musical theater, so anytime I can infuse musical theater, anytime I can infuse musical theater, I do. But I was like, okay, we'll do that. We'll move forward. And so we're creating a comic book now that will capture the essence and the experiences of refugees that are here, that are coming here. But one project that I'm extremely excited about is based in Uganda. And it's to understand some of the mental health challenges that refugees and young adults face in general. There's a dearth of mental health supports that are in this region. And so the goal is to offer supports for them. There's an intervention, a mental health intervention that has been created by community partners. All the work that I do is community based. And so they said, look, there's a dearth of mental health supports. How can we offer better services for young adults within this region? And we're working on that now so that we can create it. And so the organization I'm working with is Kairos, and they do really good work. Unfortunately, what you're hearing about in the news absolutely applies to organizations like this. So they were funded mostly by USAID, and it's gone. Folks, there are so many organizations that I've collaborated with over the years. They have no funding. And so now we're entering a new phase, especially if you're interested in doing global work, where it's going to be challenging, not impossible, but it will be challenging to think through interventions and supports. We're still going to do the work. We're not going to abandon that. But I wanted to be transparent that the landscape has shifted. So the meetings I've had with folks recently has really focused on, we don't have funding for the basic needs and necessity, or basic needs and resources and supports for our families. And as you can see, I've tried to infuse photos. So I think photos are helpful to kind of capture the essence of what these experiences have consisted of. Sidebar, the one that I love the most are the children who are dancing. Oh my goodness, they dance better than me, and many of us probably. But yeah, the energy was electric when I was there. I also had the chance to work in Zambia. So I was a visiting scholar at the University of Zambia about 2 years ago. And so once again, with the support of the Office of Global Activity, shout out to Dr. Lopez and Greta, we were able, yeah. Hold up, stop it. We need to give them more love, especially students who've been supported by them. What? Dr. Lopez, Greta, I wasn't gonna let it happen. Not on my watch. No, they actually have been very supportive. The Office of Global Activities has been instrumental to my development as a young scholar. They helped fund this trip, and they've helped support me in other ways. And so through this initiative, our goal is to think through how we can offer more partnerships, more supports, and an exchange, once again, for folks who want to work in this region. And they partner with universities all around the world to kind of think through what those collaborations can look like long term. And then my India folks who went to India, I had the opportunity to develop a India short-term program, so a short-term faculty-led program, which I think I jumbled the words, but you get the point, where we went to India for 2 weeks. It was a 2-part course. Where the first part was implemented here in the U.S. and the second part was implemented in India. We had a chance to collaborate with faculty, staff, and students, and it was invigorating. And in fact, they're going back this year. But once again, the biggest thing that I loved about this course, there was a lot of things I loved. I love India. I'm biased. I've been there a lot. I've lived there. It gives me a lot of joy. Is once again really thinking about commonalities that exist between these two countries, and ways that we can offer insight and exchange knowledge and best practices in a meaningful way. And just some more photos. Savannah, do you see her lovely self? Yes. All right. So the thing I just want to talk about briefly is this notion of colorism. So when I navigate different spaces, and I wish I could say it was just one time, but it's often. Many people will question, well, you're not black. In fact, when I was in India, I said I was black. They're like, no, you're not. I said, but I am. I'm like, am I? No. I'm like, no, I am, right? Um, but I would say in Latin America and South America and different African contexts, and in Asian contexts, different countries, there's been this line of questioning, or they're somewhat perplexed by this notion that someone fair skinned could be considered black. There's also been an elevation, or there's a hierarchy that exists. And unfortunately, this is also a phenomenon that exists in the US. And so for those of you who this might be a new concept, colorism or discrimination based on skin tone within a racial or ethnic group is a global phenomenon that affects many regions of the world. It can manifest in different ways. And so there's different beauty standards, social interactions, economic opportunities, and even within families, there could be hierarchies that exist. And so this just kind of elaborates on that a bit more. Something that I've experienced and have heard people say is an obsession with skin lightening creams. And so when I was living in South Africa, for example, many women said, you don't have to use that cream. You're so lucky. I said, oh. Or many people saying, why do you have locks? Like you would look so much better with straight hair. Like you didn't have to get locks. That like changes your looks a bit. And so earlier on, right, because this spans like decades, right? I didn't really have a response because I didn't know how to respond. But as time has moved on, and this just gives you some background on, it's still a very present issue, folks. It's a $1 billion industry. So I wish I could say this is just kind of like a minor detail, but it really is something that impacts so many people around the world. I had to start thinking about privilege and how my intersectional identities may privilege me to have a certain position in society. And we talk in social work, we talk about privilege all the time, right? And we talk about it in terms of race, and we all have, many of us we kind of navigate being a part of a marginalized group, but also perhaps certain privileges and the intersectionality of those. And so from these conversations, I had to start kind of reflecting on how I was showing up in spaces and perhaps how I was complicit with some of the insights or views. Another thing I did was I needed to understand the history of it. So I was like, wait, why does this still persist today? And so colonialism and slavery absolutely is a reason for that. And so a professor, Shirley Ann Tate, a cultural sociologist at Leeds Beckett University, traces the practice of skin bleaching as far back as ancient Egyptians, Romans, and Greeks, who discovered that honey mixed with olive oil was a skin lightening agent and applied this mixture to their body and face. And so fast forward, Europeans, they also adopted this practice, and it was used in order for them to look paler. So, many of you have been to museums, and the paintings, people are very pale. I'm like, that's not cute. I'm like, why do they look like that? Well, back then, that was the standard of beauty. That was deemed as people, they were labeled as having more money or more prestige if they were able to look a certain way or have access to these products. And so for hundreds of years, pale skin became desirable because it was associated with wealth and status. After all, only rich women were the only ones who could afford this product. And so it really was a status symbol for many. So by the 19th century, arsenic wafers had become a much promoted beauty treatment. And so there's an image of what that item looks like. Now, folks, this is poisonous. Even the products, some of the ingredients that are used in products today, they're very dangerous. People knew they were dangerous. It didn't matter. Because they wanted to have a certain rank, or they wanted to have access to wealth or prestige or status, they still use this product. And it's addictive as well. And so there was probably just, they were craving it as well. Also, there were numerous deaths that were associated with it. It didn't change the practice, and it certainly didn't change the mindset of people to say, like, hey, perhaps lightening our skin, not okay, and is definitely problematic. And so, how did Europeans export this pale ideal? Well, skin lightening was deemed, even though it was deemed as dangerous and addictive, this phenomenon developed in Africa and Asia. This happened because of colonization and slavery. So as European countries like the French and the English and the Portuguese, they started to colonize all over the world, they started to project this idea that paler skin is more important. And so to justify racial slavery, slaveholding interests espoused a white supremacist ideology which held that persons of African descent were innately inferior to whites. Whiteness became identified with all that is civilized, virtuous, and beautiful. And in this context, light-skinned slaves were separated from dark-skinned slaves and were able to work indoors. So this is definitely a phenomenon that exists in the US, but this existed all over the world. And so if you fast forward to modern times, we're still kind of processing or still we're still affected by this mindset that existed many years ago. And since I brought up India, and like I said, I lived there quite a bit. India's long history of colonization by Europeans, so by the Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, and the British, has had a similar effect. Folks, I could have used a lot of countries in Asian and African context as a case study. In fact, I got excited. My students know this. I do deep dives, and I kind of had enough content for like 3 hours. Miles, I was out of control. But I at least wanted to show that this phenomenon absolutely impacted and intersects and exasperates systems like caste. Right, so if you're thinking about the caste system, we don't have time to go into it. Find me, we can talk about it, right? This is a system, people are born into a particular caste. It persists throughout their lives. Now, if you also think about this notion of colorism, that's going to make matters worse as well. And so not surprisingly, even though India became independent in 1947, light skin was and still is associated with higher social standing. And so in a study by Nagar, it states that the skin color plays a major role in arranged marriages, which is a fairly common practice in India, which traces back to white rule, leading to, once again, certain groups feeling like they're more superior or they have more power because of their white skin. And other groups are deemed as inferior. But once again, if you also think about people who are from lower caste, so the Dalits or the untouchables, which happens to be at the lower caste or not even in the caste system, that can make it even more challenging. So if you are dark skinned and you're a part of a lower caste, your life outcomes are quite dismal. Now, once again, India is just an example of that. Folks, this phenomenon, this reality can really it exists all over the world. If you had lighter skin, you were closer to the opportunities that were only afforded to white people, such as increased privileges, higher social standing, and better employment and marital prospects. And I've kind of alluded to this already, but this is something that I've been reflecting on. And folks, the reason why I'm honing in on this, I could have honed on many topics, is this is something that my travels has afforded me, right? It's allowed me to think critically about some of these issues and how they map on in a global setting. It's allowed me to check my implicit biases and the privileges that I have. It's allowed me to hopefully teach other folks about the world. So it's not just, although I'm excited, I appreciate all the love and the celebration for getting to 100 countries. To me, the milestone is not just a number, right? The milestone is really broadening my worldview and making me a critical thinker and making me want to know more about how does these issues persist in different contexts. And as a social worker, how can I push back on these systems? And so when I engage in these conversations now around colorism, and we're winding down, this is it. This is like the travel tips. Woo! Get out there and travel too. Get your passport. But when I think about when I have these conversations, now I do push back. Now I do push back on certain beauty standards. Or when someone says, "Oh, I prefer light skin." Hold up. What you talking about? Why is that? That's why we're still in the predicament we are in today, because we're elevating certain groups over others. It is okay to shut it down and to have conversations as to the history of some of these systems. It is not okay to be silent. I'm not silent anymore. So that's how I try to leverage my privilege. And then once again, many conversations and just trying to understand the landscape has yielded and really informed my understanding of the world. Now, last part, travel tips. If you're like, okay, Ashley, and folks, you'll have access to these slides, so don't worry. And you can find me. You can ask any question you want. I get a little too excited about travel questions, to be honest. All right, take at least one solo trip. Just one, maybe two. It really is life. I know it sounds very cheesy, but it's transformative. It forces you out of your shell. You have to do everything yourself. You end up talking to people that you normally wouldn't. Now, let's think about it. When you travel with your friends, who are you focused on? You're talking to your friends. When you're by yourself, you're just kind of there. If you're a little friendly, oh yeah, you'll have some friends. It forces you out of your comfort zone. You end up connecting with others. You have to be a little bit more alert. You got to be a little bit more attuned and stuff. And it's worthwhile. So this was an example. I traveled to Croatia. Another tip, travel during off-peak times. You can get really good deals. And I was by myself. I mean, I met a friend, a parrot. That was my friend. And then I met people just kind of around. And so I sparked conversations with people on the plane, at a cafe. I also like to watch, just sit at a cafe and watch. I also like to wander. Those are things I like to do. But love it, do it. It could just be to the next city over, do it. Here are some travel tips. I'm not gonna go through them just for the sake of time, but know they exist. These are best practices. Folks, this list could have been 50, 60, 100 different tips. But yeah, my gift to you. I'm gonna keep it moving though. You can kind of skim them. Something that I will say, research your destinations before you travel. Why, Ashley? I've gotten lost a few times, just a little bit. One time happened quite recently. So I was traveling to Italy for a conference. Remember I told you, I like to travel to neighboring countries if I have a little time. So I left a week early. And so I said, I want to go to the Republic of San Marino. Now, if you are wondering, where is that? It's a very small country, one of the smallest countries in Europe. So I said, I'm going. I did my research, but not enough. So I booked my train tickets. I get to Rome. And my partner's here, by the way. Abby, raise your hand, Abby. Abby's going to be a part of this story. He is a key player. He is a important part. So I tell Abby, I'm like, I'm ready. It took 8 hours for me to get to San Marino. Because I'm an academic and I'm on the tenure track and I have to write a lot. I brought grants. I wrote a grant. I worked on a manuscript. It was amazing. I left around 1 p.m. No, let's say about like 3. And so I ended up in San Marino at about 11 p.m. Folks, it was not San Marino. It was the village of San Marino, not the Republic of San Marino. Now, it was 11 p.m. I got off the train. It was dark. It was desolate. There was no one there. Folks, I want you to envision a scary movie in your mind. It's dark. It's desolate. There are no lights. There's no one there. You can hear my suitcase against the concrete. And I text my partner, I don't think I'm in San Marino. He was like, where are you? So I was like, I actually don't know where I am. I thought it was San Marino. The train, it says San Marino. So he finds my location. Folks, I was 9 hours away from San Marino. Now, let me remind you, it was dark. It was desolate. There was no one there. There was one light in this little area. It's a village, folks. This is not a city. This was not like Ann Arbor, you get to, Amtrak, and nothing was there. So I look around and I go, maybe I can just like sleep in the train. It wasn't even a train station, folks. It was a stop. And so I look around and I see a light turn on. And I tell Avi, I said, I think I'm gonna go knock on the door. He said, don't do it. Don't do it. I said, I don't know what else to do. So I knock on the door, very gentle taps. And I hear some rummaging in the house. And they're speaking in Italian, folks. Okay, I'm in Italy. It's not English. So I hear, but I don't know what they're saying, but I can hear the stress in their voice, like what's happening. So I knock on the door. I said, excuse me. Now, folks, imagine, doesn't this sound like a scary movie? I could be like I'm the one that could be, like the dangerous person. I said, excuse me, can you help me? I think I'm in the wrong city. They said, where are you trying to go? This was their son. Thankfully, their son appeared. He's like 18. He was like, where are you going? I was like, I'm trying to get to San Marino. He's like, this happens all the time. There's like an entire blog about people like you. Now, remember, it's 11 p.m., so I kind of need to get to where I have to go. So, and I'm far. So, folks, when I say there are good people on this planet, not only did they find me a hotel that was 40 miles away, that's how remote it was. They took me to the hotel, called it was a couple that owned the hotel, called them, paid for the hotel. I tried to pay them some money. They were like, no. In fact, they were offended. Like, how dare you? The next day, because remember, I'm far. And I was determined to still go to San Marino. Yeah, I'm that person. I was like, I've done all this. I'm going. Doesn't matter. Folks, I was 9 hours away, though. So this couple took me to the train station, paid for the train, and said, good luck. Do your research. Perhaps if I looked that up, wouldn't have ended up in the village of San Marino. But what it did teach me is, my goodness, there's some good folks out there. People will help you. Folks, that's not an isolated story. I've had many stories where I was in Jordan. I was in Amman at a conference, got lost. A woman with her children drove past and was like, what's going on here? Just to give some context, it's taboo for women to kind of walk around Amman by themselves. It's not a common practice. And so they were very perplexed as to what was going on. And so they helped me. She actually ended up taking me to the place. I played with the kids. Later on that night, I ended up going to their house and had some delicious food. But yeah, random stories. Don't be like me. Do a little research. I would like to say you'll never get lost, but that would be a lie. But if you can minimize some of those pitfalls, that would be great. Here's some other tips as well. But folks, I'm going to forge ahead. I don't know what I do with my clicker. In the midst of, here you are. I feel like that with like my phone and glasses. All right, some other tippy tips. You can look at that later. This was just another, I planned my entire trip to Australia by myself, a month. Go to Australia, it's great. Kangaroos, symphony opera, all that good stuff. And then Europe, I've traveled to Europe on my own quite a bit. You save lots of money. Hostels are your best friends. I've met lots of friends in hostels. So Austria, Bosnia, Oxford, Iceland, Spain. Yeah, some of the countries represented. Travel on a budget. I'm not going to go through this, but these are concrete strategies you can use. What I hear often from people, and it's valid, and I understand, pockets can be tight. I get it. Remember, first generation low income. I did not come from an affluent family, so it's not like parents were giving me money once a summer. Celia, it wasn't happening. So I had to come up with creative ways to travel. So I've stayed in hostels, homestays. If there's a colleague that has a family member there, I'm going to find out. Cutting unnecessary expenses. There's so many different tactics you can employ to get to where you want to go. Traveling during off-peak season, all that. Eat like a local. When I was in Switzerland, because it was so pricey, I went to the grocery store every day. I was like, can't eat out every day. And so that was a strategy that was really helpful. Some other tips. I told you I got excited with the tips, but these are concrete. For work trips, I think I've added this already. This was when I was in Nepal. So I love dancing. I was wandering, and then I ended up stumbling upon a festival happening. Wonderful. And so I ended up dancing and just getting to know them. And and we became friends. Also, a bonus, meet friends and, retain them. I still keep in contact with a lot of these folks, which is really cool. Because we're academics, I thought if there are academic conferences or writing retreats you can take part in, do it. Once again, you can be very productive in other contexts. So I had a chance to do that while I was in Colombia. And then adventure. I like adventure. I was at an event and they said, tell us about yourselves. And they were like, are you adventurous, Ashley? And I was like, absolutely not. I know. I told I know. That was false. I didn't get it right. So yeah, try something new, folks. Skydiving, ice skating, whatever it is, folks. So these are just a few of the helicopter, petting this little giraffe, which I named him Caesar. In Indonesia, swinging. This was in Alaska. So hiking a glacier, right? So I try very, very hard to broaden and do things I normally wouldn't do. I went surfing when I was in Brazil. It's incredible. When I was in Antarctica, I went camping. You heard it correct. I froze. Yeah. Zach was like, That was the pre-photo. If I took a post photo, it was very, very different look on my face. So yeah. New Zealand kayaking with Abby. So yeah, fun times. And just a little bit more. So in Jordan, riding on a camel, zip lining in Costa Rica, a lot going on. So we have a few minutes. Folks in the room, you have a note card near you. Hopefully you have a pen. I know this was fairly quick, but I hope we gave you a little flavor of some of the travel that can happen. Oh, and some of you actually are receiving postcards that I got in New Zealand. That's from New Zealand. On that note card, I want you to think through what is one travel goal you have in the next 5 years. So you have some time. I'm not expecting you to travel next week, next month. I understand it might take some time. I understand a budget might be required, but what is something where you would like to go? For my Zoom friends, I haven't forgotten about you. I hope you're doing well. You're fabulous. In the chat box, write down one travel goal you have for the next 5 years. Yes, okay. I'm scrolling in the comment, in the chat box in Zoom. Thank you so much, folks, for your engagement. I know you may feel somewhat removed, but you are absolutely a part of this community. I'm seeing South Africa, Egypt, South America, Eastern Europe, Brazil. What? I love it. China, Japan. Folks, can I come with you? Just kidding. Take that solo trip. Folks, and I'm one of those people, if someone introduces the idea of traveling, I'm all for it. I'm like, really? When? Where? How? Awesome. Folks, keep it coming. And yes, take those trips. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. I am done, folks. I will definitely stick around. Savannah's ready. I love that. I will stick around, but folks, reach out to me if you have questions, if you want to unpack some of these themes a bit more. Once again, this was a flavor of some of my past experience, past and present, and hopefully future experiences. But I love to talk about travel and definitely the intersection of travel and social work. But it has been an honor and a privilege to be here today. And it's also been super fun to share a little bit about what has motivated and prompted these travels. So thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you can keep filling out your cards. That's my gift to you. We'll do the raffle shortly. Are there any questions though? And this could be over Zoom as well as in person. Folks, if in Zoom, you can unmute yourselves or you can write in the chat box. And thank you so much for the love and support. You all are amazing as well. I mean, I am in good company. So any questions or comments or reflections? Yes.
How many of the 100 would you say you went to alone that you traveled?
Maybe about 60. Yeah. It's to the point now, folks. It's hard for me to actually want to travel with people. I'm like, oh, you know, when you're kind of used to being on your own, you're like, oh, I have to like actually, you know, care about others. That's the only time I'll say that. As a social worker, I genuinely do care about others. But on those trips, I'm like, ah.
I just had two questions. So along the same lines as the first question, what percentage would you say were connected to your work as
Oh.
opposed to just leisure travel?
Yeah. A lot of them are like, I would say 60, maybe 50% of them for work. Yeah. And folks, I'm happy to kind of, not today because we have to go, but I'm happy to kind of map out what that looks like. But when I lived in India, for example, I probably traveled to about 15 countries over the span. I lived there for about 2 years. So I probably traveled to about 15 countries. I was in Uganda this past summer. I typically go to Uganda or Zambia. I've been to those countries for the last few years. I was like, I want to go to Ghana. Now, mind you, folks, that is on the other side of Africa, so it's not even close. But I was like, I've never been to Ghana, Benin, and Togo. So I did that 2 years ago. Last summer, I said, oh, I haven't been to Rwanda. So I went to Rwanda, right? So I usually will tack it on. So I would say quite a bit. When I mentioned Switzerland, there was maybe 3 or 4 countries I visited just on that trip. It was easier to do that when I was younger. It's harder now. And Abby's like, what? Where are you going? You gonna be going that long? He's supportive of it, obviously, but I have to get back home too. But when I was younger, which I'm talking to a lot of incredibly amazing and smart young people, absolutely. I did it all the time. It's like in my blood. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, that is
Especially for the amount of time
that is a great question. I usually try to learn basic phrases and sentences for a country where I'm not necessarily planning on staying long term. Bless you. Have I used Google Translate? Absolutely. When I was in Beijing, I love fashion, by the way. When I was in Beijing, I saw a coat that I liked, and I needed to get the coat down in price, and I didn't know Mandarin, and the woman didn't know English, and so we were doing a lot of pointing and smiling, and like I'm gesturing like I put that in my purse, I want that. And she's like, I don't know, and I pulled out my phone and we did Google Translate. Now that was for like a very quick, kind of interaction. I would say if you learn basic phrases, maybe a few sentences like, where's the bathroom? Hello, my name. I do try to learn that. It goes a long way. Even if it's choppy, that's okay. People actually are tickled by it. They typically they appreciate when you're trying. They get it. Sometimes they don't. I just got back from Taiwan. I almost got arrested because I didn't. Oh yeah, story. Read my memoir, folks. It's going to be juicy. That was a time where I wish I knew a little bit more because the few phrases I had under my belt and the few phrases that the police officer had was not helpful. Just to give you some insight, it wasn't something like, woo, I jaywalked and I almost got arrested. It was scary. I made it back. Oh no, seriously, Trina's like, whoa. I know I told my mom, poor woman, she's like, I cannot with your stories. I stressed her out. Yeah, I have many stories. It's very funny. But I'm here to tell the story. I'm laughing about it. You learn. I learned a lot. But yeah, knowing a little bit can go a long way. If you plan on living or staying in a place for a bit longer, then you can take language classes. So when I lived in India, like prior to going, I took classes in Hindi. My partner speaks Hindi and like multiple languages, so we practice at home. So it kind of helps if you anticipate going to places multiple times. Then I would say there's like apps you can use to practice. You can take classes. Yeah. But for some of the short-term trips, I try to learn just a few phrases to get by. That Google Translate is your best friend. And smiling and just having a good spirit and trying can go a long way. People usually will help you. Yeah.
We had a couple of online questions.
Oh, my friends online. Yay.
So one says, I was thinking of doing woofing where you learn about sustainable farming. Do you have any thoughts on woofing as a way of traveling or learning or know someone who may know about it? Are you familiar with woofing?
No.
No. Okay. It stands for, I don't remember what it stands for. Do you know? World Organization
Oh.
Organic Farmers. So where you travel and you stay on farms and you work on farms, often for exchange of
I
housing.
must. Okay, I haven't done that before, but when I was in Australia, I met a young person who did that, and she was able to see like she traveled all over Australia with during this method, and so she loved it. She rated, yeah. So yeah, I personally I haven't done that before, but let me be very clear, folks. Whatever tactic or strategy you can use to see the world, I'm not kidding. Like I did it. So if that's a strategy that aligns with your vision, right? So it wasn't just random. I mean, once again, me traveling to Turkey, I was working with refugees, so it wasn't just kind of a random trip. But did I have to go to Turkey? Probably not. But boy, am I glad I did. So if that's something that aligns with their vision for what they want to do academically or professionally, and it's a cost efficient way to do it, yeah, do it. Okay, another question. Were there other questions? Oh, yes, friend.
Hi.
Hi.
I feel like I saw a lot on like social media about Black women and tips for Black women traveling and like places to and to not go. And I was wondering, like, in your experience, how much have you listened to advice like that? Because some things are circumstantial, and then also just being a Black woman, it's a lot of places that are going to be oppositional towards us. So, like,
Yeah.
how did you kind of navigate that, or like advice like that?
That's a good question. So earlier on in my travel days, I did not yield to any of that. I just kind of went. Now that I've gotten older and the world has shifted, it's always changing. I definitely think it's worthwhile to understand the historical and political context of where you're going when it comes to race or gender or a lot of identities. So if you can identify like communities that may look like you or have similar, that would be ideal. I'm hesitant to say you can't go places because that just doesn't land well. Also, there's certain countries that people will say don't go because it's been deemed as dangerous, or there's like myths and misconceptions about that, and so I get nervous about there being a list where like Black women, for example, can't go. But I do think it's important to understand the historical context around race. Race looks different in other countries, so it's not. It just doesn't manifest the same way that it does here in the U.S. It doesn't mean racism doesn't exist. I've heard people say it doesn't exist. I'm like in European countries or in Asian countries. Yeah, it does. It's a little different. So I think if you understand that landscape, but once again, if you have people, and I usually try to think of people, networks in that area in a country that I can lean on if something happens. It's worthwhile. But yeah, you can look at, like I said, it's up to you. I try not to read too much into some of those lists, but we do have to understand as Black women, we show up in spaces very differently. And so I think if we understand the context, that makes a difference. But let's talk about that more offline because I have more to say. And if there's other like Black, I'm seeing this because I'm seeing a whole lot of melanin in this little. I'm like, oh, okay, I like this. We can certainly talk about that. I also know people who travel in groups as well for safety, just for safety. I get it. I wish I could tell you folks that I've never experienced any challenging situations abroad as a woman and as a Black woman. It's been very few. Obviously, I keep going, so it hasn't altered my entire life. But there have been moments as a Black woman where it's been scary. And this applies to a lot of people in the room. Unfortunately, around the world, there's a lot of sexism, and there's very limited and antiquated and problematic views of women and violence against women. And so, not to alter the mood, I know this is a celebration, but this is the reality. It's stuff. These are issues we have to contend with in the U.S. And you better believe, on a global scale, there's a lot that women have to engage with as well. And so that's actually some of the work when I'm working communities, this comes up. That's why I typically work with women, children and youth and women, because they're having to navigate that. So as a traveler, you will as well. There are best practices. There are so many best practices. And so we can do part 2, Katie. I'm just saying, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But all joking aside, if we want to do like a deep dive in terms of, things I've done to navigate some really uncomfortable and scary situations, I think we should. Because I know that can also be a reason why people don't travel, right? Because there's anxiety around that. It's something I have to think about too. More to come, part 2, I guess. I'm seeing some head nods. You are, I don't know what your name is, but you are so affirming. Your like head nods have been very helpful. Like, I like there's certain people you can look in the Renee, I can like, yeah. Very affirming, very affirming. Anything else? I know people have lives and things to do. So I want to honor that. I'm gonna stick around a bit more, but thank you. Oh, I didn't even say it again. Oh, wait. Some friends. I want to just thank all of you for spending time with me today. Thank you for enjoying. Oh, the raffle. How dare you all let me leave? Trina was the one. How are we gonna do the raffle? And so I'm kind of like, if people are familiar with Vanna White from, oh yeah, I do like a, dun, 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 dun. Oh yeah. Folks online, I know you're like, okay. Oh, thanks, Rogerio, another mentor. Sadia, love you. A lot of great folks on here. Thank you so much for coming. So folks online, we're doing the raffle. If this does not appeal to you or you feel like this has nothing to do with me, we understand if you have to log out. But stay in touch, email me. I'm on LinkedIn. You are my friends. I call people friends even if we've never met. Don't be alarmed. But I hope we can connect soon. Thank you so much for your engagement. I appreciate you.